Of the many contentious issues between the United States and China, that of China's currency is one of the most raw. The claim goes from the United States that China manipulates its renminbi, keeping it cheap against the dollar, the better to facilitate Chinese exports, with the consequence that jobs are lost in the United States and the American manufacturing sector suffers. Well, I'm going to explore this issue in conversation with my colleague Dr. Tom Wales in this briefing, and we're going to start, Tom, by examining the forces at work driving the complaint that the United States have manifest in a bill going through the Senate even as we speak.
Well, Graham, it's really the usual suspects. It's basically the usual group of labor unions, some sort of left-wing commentators. Paul Krugman has been sort of almost advocating a currency war for some time now, and that is the New York Times columnist. And some businesses that don't want to compete with cheap Chinese labor at the lower end of the manufacturing sort of value-add scale. So you put all of these together and you have a relatively potent but actually not insufficient coalition to really get anything through.
So let's explore some of the possible outcomes. What's going to happen to this bill?
Well, I don't mean to be terse, but there's absolutely no likelihood of this sort of legislation going through. If you're worried about U.S. countermeasures against supposed renminbi manipulation, you don't have enough to worry about at the moment. There are some things going on in Europe that are maybe just a little bit more important than what's really a political grandstanding session in the Senate. Even if this week there is a passage of the bill in the Senate, which I'd say is unlikely, the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, has said that he's not having the bill, which means the bill's toast. It's not only DOA, but it's dead before it even arrives.
So we ought to look then, I think, at the wider impact of this problem on United States-China relations, perhaps looking out during the course of the next year.
Well, the general trend has not been good. I mean, I think there were a couple of signs recently that both sides are intent on keeping relations on a fairly even keel. For instance, the U.S. decided only to sell electronics upgrades to Taiwan for some of its F-16s instead of new F-16s. Yes. So there have been a couple of these sort of small gestures on both sides. But the outstanding issues in terms of countervailing duties, Chinese treatment of some U.S. imports like chicken feed of all things, which is actually worth hundreds of millions of dollars a year, is going to keep relations really on the back foot for some time to come. And they will be bad, perhaps even worse, through 2012 because, of course, we'll have the political rhetoric heating up again. But the chance of actual passage of a bill like this, zero.
Okay. And I suppose as the other half of the story, we ought to look at it from Beijing's point of view. And there is an unhappy coincidence that this bill is going through Congress at a time when the appreciation of the renminbi against the dollar is effectively slowed, if not stalled.
Yeah, you and I have talked about this, and and this is really a question for you to consider. I mean, it could be that China has decided that its exporters are feeling such distress at the moment that it needs to halt the appreciation. Or it could be actually, if you wanted to make a kind of bullish case, a prelude to a potential second massive stimulus of the kind that we saw in 2008, designed to insulate China from some kind of negative contingency in Europe. But what's your view?
I rather suspect that it's the worrying state of many small and medium enterprises that is giving the Chinese pause. We have written about that ourselves and advised clients of the extent of that problem. And there is a bigger picture here touching on politics too, that we ought to refer to before concluding this particular issue, and that is that we have a political leadership change well in the planning stage and to be implemented during the course of next year. So for the Chinese macroeconomic stability, a prize at any time is a special one at this stage, which partly explains, I think, some of the fury that's come from the Chinese official apparatus in response to this Senate bill. Perhaps in the light of what you said rather tersely about the prospects of its passage, it might perhaps calm things down in Beijing, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I think maybe the outlook for stability in China is somewhat better than people think, not least because the official sort of jockeying for the slots on the Politburo Standing Committee is still going on.
That's right. So some sort of slowdown in the Chinese economy is unavoidable to some extent. Indeed, it's in line with Beijing's wishes as it rebalances, and of course we've got the drying up of demand in the developed world. But this is a crucial time for the leadership, and they're going to make sure that any downward adjustment is modest, is carefully orchestrated, because the cost of getting it wrong could be very, very serious. Beijing will keep the fires burning at least for the next year, do everything it can. Tom, thanks very much. And thank you for watching this expert briefing. Do look out for our further analysis on China-United States relation in days to come.